Hi, I'm Jedediah Wheeler, Executive Director, Arts and Cultural Programming at Montclair State University, here in Montclair, New Jersey. Welcome to the Alexander Kasser Theater. About 18 months ago, a little bit over, I had the good fortune of sitting down with the artistic director of All Arts, Jorn Wiesbrot. And I wanted him to see the space. I didn't really know what was going to happen. But once he came out here, he immediately invited his colleagues, the executive producer, Christy Geslin, and her team came out here and witnessed the possibilities. This partnership between Peak Performances and WNET's All Arts is transformative. It's seismic to be providing the highest level of professional capture available in broadcast to the most contemporary artists of our time. Peak Performances is an unusual series of amazing artists that normally find their way onto this stage. But the future actually is something a little bit different under these enormously painful times. However, as luck will have it, last season we began this partnership with All Arts, which enabled us to capture 5 amazing productions.
Hope you enjoy this very unique sonic experience.
Love is an important thing.
The creative possibilities are mind-boggling in this kind of theater. This theater was built for multidisciplinary performance, for new ideas in dance, music, theater, and opera to be realized. I want very much for you to get a sense of the uniqueness of this theater, because the scale of the space gives us maximum choice. We have mounted 6 4K robotic cameras, and those cameras are connected by fiber optics to probably one of the most sophisticated state-of-the-art schools of communication on the East Coast. In addition to that, and Falling and Loving, the production we're about to see, is a great example of what more we can add. Because with Falling and Loving, not only did we have those 6 cameras, but we have 6 additional cameras, including an overhead.
Just a touch. Simple as that.
An intimate touch.
How can you talk like this?
Now that you've had a brief tour of the Alexander Kasser Theater stage, I thought it would be fun for you to hear from Elizabeth STREB and Anne Bogart about their own personal experience about making the unbelievable real here on the Kasser stage. Each one, I'm hoping, will reveal the aha moment that brought them to the realization that what they're creating here could only be made in this theater for broadcast capture?
I think the most aha moment, and this was kind of a grubby, grunty aha moment, was this is ridiculous. I've got 54 buckets in the air with all of this material in each one. And when the dancers started, what I realized was, well, first, how extraordinary this could be. But what I ran into, which wasn't exactly, again, as I mentioned, it's a grubby, grunty aha moment, is nobody likes to have guck dropped on their head. And nobody knew, depending on which string, there were 54 strings hanging down. And they were supposed to just, as they were passing and falling and flying, keep pulling them, the actors and the dancers, and Bogart's actors, my dancers. And it took what really occurred to me at the beginning of our rehearsals at the Casa Theater in Montclair, is how long it was going to take them to continually pull those cords, because they knew what was going to happen to them. And I thought, I'm fighting against the natural instincts of the human in a way that STREB always does, get on this turning wheel, get on this spinning ladder, slam into a wall, etc. But this was a whole other incendiary, emotional experience that I got from all 12 of the performers in this piece, that I realized was going to be the biggest stepping stone or the biggest block to being able to really manifest what 54 buckets pouring down on the human race could provide in terms of an impediment to even walk instead of slipping and falling. Well, I was concerned about the actors, the SITI and Bogart's performers, the 6 of them, and the interruptive quality of having stuff fall on you, and their desire to pull the cords, albeit not so ardently at first. And I realized that, however, because of their training, both in Suzuki and Viewpoints, they were the most physical theater company I can imagine. They're used to using their bodies. And because they took pop action classes and we took Viewpoints, as well as Suzuki classes with them, we were trading skills that really, even so, without the training that we each participated in on the other company's turf, even so, there was a certain amount of overlap. They were used to using their bodies in that way. As Anne Bogart would say, you choose a body that would say those words, and we choose the bodies that would do those moves. And still in all, I was a little concerned about talking, because we don't talk, we just do. And they talk and do. And I felt that my concerns evaporated very quickly once we got into the Casa Theater in Montclair and started putting this together. I was relieved in that sense. The actors did STREB moves in the piece, pretty beautifully, horizontal pops on their back, slam hits, and the dancers spoke. And at first I was like, dancers are terrible at speaking. Don't make them do what they cannot do. And they were all beautiful, and the way Anne directed it was amazing. But for me, the joy, my breath got taken away every single time we ran the piece, because to see all of that stuff fall and to watch the emotional explosion, both from the actor's point of view and the dancer's point of view, being in the muck together, this uncertainty that never evaporated, because you were stepping and trying to avoid the walls, and people would keep falling, the actors and the dancers, and the falling wasn't prescribed. It was just gonna happen whether anybody liked it or not. It was the increasing unpredictability of this contraption called the Guck machine, and the tons of stuff that would fall during the course of an hour which is how long the piece was. And it is the closest thing to representing life emotionally and physically, and its inherent unpredictability. I didn't think about the fact that it wasn't tourable ever. But when the numbers came in about how much it would cost to tour, and a lot of presenters came to that week of shows, and they were really excited about it, but they couldn't afford it, you know. And that's why All Arts is a complete godsend. That we'll be able to see this from 12 different cameras in all these different ways that even a theater audience would never be able to view. I will treasure that month with all my heart and soul, and realize, here's what it makes me realize about the future whenever our physical future comes back to us post-COVID. There's nothing I can't do.
Yeah.
I get out of my head that there's a producer that won't buy this show. And you know, touring STREB with tons of equipment and a 53-foot truck was never practical. And maybe the best place for STREB is on buildings and outside, and not asking a theater to load us in. But now that the Castle Theater loaded in Falling and Loving, infinity's the limit. Well, I think that to everyone watching, even though this happened in a theater, I know you'll recognize the vocabulary of Falling and Loving and the 53 buckets of guck, both glitter, water, molasses, sand, cereal, everything you could imagine that could fall when you open the chute, coming down, raining down on the 12 performers. You are going to recognize either things you've already done and messed around yourself with your own inventions of, slopping your body around in the guck, or it's going to remind you of something you've dreamt of doing your whole life. There's nothing fancy about it. It's just an example and a contraption that everyone could figure out on their own. And not just this, but anything you imagine, you can make yourself. And it would provide and provoke new vocabulary in the air, not necessarily practical. It won't perhaps feed people. It won't, build houses. But it will excite the spirit. And so every idea you ever have that seems unreasonable, you don't even think of it again because of the sort of impracticality of it. Don't forget about it. Go on out there in your backyard, do it. Do something that would be so surprising that the whole world would want to know about it. So I always think that there's nothing that's impossible except for the person asking a question that seems so unreasonably true. It doesn't occur to you to ask it. So collect your questions and manifest your results of those questions, and the world will be a richer place.
Oh, so beautiful. You're a genius.
No, but don't you think? I mean, I come from low-class Mason family in Rochester, New York, and so I thought crashing was much more exciting than being a good writer, like you have to put your focus on what the real subject of something that you notice. And even though accidents aren't good, it's when everything's out of control. And in a way, I think that Falling and Loving is one big accident after another, after another, after another. And it was horrifying for me to watch it too, I will say, every single night. Because accidents that create opportunities for future actions. Because you thought being out of control was the opposite of what dancers were supposed to do. But in my world, being out of control in a moment that you're not expecting to be out of control is actually the subject, the most critical and magnificent event that could possibly happen. How do you create a situation where mostly you're out of control? That's a beautiful thing. It's just so amazing. The world is presenting us with immutable tragedy and exceptional hope for the future, and hopefully a moral reshift in the United States.
So Jed, I have to respond to your first comment before I go to your second question,
Okay.
which is about making work about the future. And I take that as a compliment, and yet I do not think about the future. And I think it's important to say,
Yes.
like the future, you know how they say, when you want to see an eclipse, the sun is too bright. And so if you look directly at the sun, you'll burn your eyes. And so you look at a piece of cardboard in order to see the sun. And so this cardboard, if somebody was looking at you, they say, oh, this person's really interested in the cardboard. But actually you're interested in the sun, right? So the cardboard, in a sense, is the past. I do not think about the future because the sun is too bright, I'll burn my eyes. And in order to be in the present, I look at the past to see whose shoulders we're standing on and who hasn't finished their sentences, if you know what I mean. The people who had things to say and who were asking important questions, like the great plays in the world always ask great questions. So I don't look at the future. I don't think that human beings are able to predict anything. It's been shown by neuroscience that we can't. We're always flawed. So that doesn't mean I'm not interested, but I'm always looking back. But thinking I want to learn how to live in the present, but it does. So I'm interested to hear you say, and I take it quite seriously, that it's about the future, and I take that as a compliment. But I don't think you can look at the future by predict the future or make any big proclamations about the future by looking at the future, because we'll be wrong, whatever it is. I mean, did we know that COVID was going to do this to it? Did we know we were going to have a rupture in our world the way that we have? Did we know that the World Trade Towers were going to fall over? You know, we cannot predict the future. Although there are people who were saying that both the World Trade Towers would come down and that COVID would happen and that there would be a seismic rupture in the social and political fabric of our lives. That's true, but I'm not somebody who could do that. Anyway, and now I'm going to respond to your question, which is about embarking on this journey with Elizabeth, and you are part of this. You know, to quote my colleague, and also he's a generation older than I am, Tadashi Suzuki, the great Japanese director, he said, international cultural exchange is impossible, therefore we must try. I always thought that was a beautiful thing to say, but I would say that any kind of cross-disciplinary work is also impossible, therefore we must try. And why you are part of this is that the only thing you can do is if you feel a kind of, as they call it in French, a frisson de coeur, which means much less poetically, it means goosebumps. If you feel goosebumps at the prospect of doing something, do it. And certainly it was Chuck Mee's idea that Elizabeth and I would work together with his text. And we met together. Neither of us really knew how it would turn out or what we were going to do. And I think we both got frisson de coeur, which means say yes to this impossible thing. It is an impossible thing. And then you waded into the Soho Star restaurant. We had a meeting set up with you. And the first thing you said to us was, well, clearly we're going to do this. What else shall we talk about? Which was another way of saying, that's what you said. It's what you said, Jed. Another way of saying, you know, the situation is right. And so when I proposed this project to members of SITI Company, they look at me like I'm crazy. They said, the actor said, I can't do what the STREB dancers do. It's impossible. We cannot do this. All the more reason to do it. The STREB dancers, I think probably, and I don't know if this is true, they looked at Elizabeth and said, we can't speak. And I remember when we were in Montclair and Elizabeth had to go away to Paris for a week, and the last thing she said to me is, just remember, my dancers cannot speak. Well,
yes.
What did we do about that, Jed? All of these things are impossible. You know, Elizabeth designed an impossible set to work with, absolutely impossible. And then every time the actors or the dancers tried to make it easier, she said, that's not interesting. You actually have to embrace the hard part of it. And so everything that we did was next to impossible. But because of your belief in us and encouragement, because of Elizabeth's belief in me and my belief in hers and Chuck's belief in all of us, that's how things get done. But not through a sense that they can get done, but that something might happen that can be transformative for not only us, but also for audiences. And now when I look back at what we made from this COVID period we're in, from this period that is much more than COVID, but a real political and cultural rupture that's happening, I'm so proud of this work because it is visceral. It asks one to challenge every imaginative obstacle that we might possibly face. And we're all facing a huge obstacle. And so I think that it's a big fat metaphor as you watch it. And Elizabeth says to me, I don't believe in metaphor. And I say, yeah, right. You think that when we are watching a dancer fly over something impossible to fly over and land smack on their bodies, you think that's not metaphor? She said, no, it's real. In my mind, it's metaphor, and we will always to our graves probably disagree on this matter. But I think you're watching a metaphor for what we're going through right now. Well, I did have an aha moment, and I don't know that it's going to be satisfactory for you, but for me, it was a real aha moment, which is, I'm very dependent upon the brilliance of actors. And these actors who I've worked with, some of whom I've worked with nearly 30 years, they were terrified. They were terrified of the machine. And I said, look, I promise you, you don't have to get in the gunk if you don't want to. We can stage it so you're outside of that gunk machine. And if you want to try and go in the gunk, you can put on these big white suits that protect you from all this stuff. It has a little head thing on it. And we were in Saratoga workshopping this, and the actors had actually put on the white suits and they'd gone in and they had actually started to have the gunk fall on them, and the dancers were flying by, and they started, and all of a sudden, all of the actors took their suits off and dove in. And that was my aha moment where I said, holy cow, it happened. This is a show that's going to happen, because until then, I just didn't know. I couldn't ask them to do things that are actually quite dangerous. It's slippery. Oh. There are iron balls flying everywhere that you don't know what's coming down out of the ceiling. And so to ask them to do that, but when they said yes through action, and talk about viscerality, that was a visceral moment for me, and where I said, yeah, baby, this is something that's going to happen, and it's going to be amazing. That makes me think you can't fake joy, right? There's nothing worse than faking enthusiasm or joy, because it just feels so false. And I think in the theater, making a successful work that actually feels visceral is a combination of control and the thing you can't control, the fake and the real. And so the fake is maybe the structure of the play, or even the words could be, you say they're fake, they're written out. But the thing you can't fake, it's why W.C. Fields said never act with children or dogs, because they're not fake, they're always interesting. That joy that you feel, and I'm glad that you felt it, was absolutely a consequence of lining up the fake enough that the real would happen. So the fake is, I know that the ball is, I've got 2 inches. That's what I've got, and I won't get hit. So that's actors having really counted how many steps they have to take so that they're not going to get hit. The real thing is the sensation of things falling on them that you feel. And it's shown in most neurophysicists agree that it's a thing called mirror neurons. A lot of people say they don't exist, but that's another story, is that as you're watching it, you actually have the sensation of that person who's feeling it. You're actually, as an audience member, stopping yourself from doing what they're doing. But that's another story. But that I'm glad you brought up joy, and I didn't mean to interrupt you because you were on a train of thought. But the joy is real, and it is a product of training and really taking care of the fake stuff. Yeah. And the love, I'm glad you even used the L word, because it's true. And it's a little bit like the sun. You can't look directly at it, the L word, that love is something that's hard to talk about. But the thing that actually truly happened is admiration, is both companies looked across at each other and they kind of fell in love. They were in love with the other group could do. You know, the actors looked at the dancers and just went, I love you. And the dancers looked at the actors and they said, I love you. And then they walked towards each other and look what happened.
I can't possibly say how amazing it is that WNET has put its resources and its imagination behind this broadcast. I want to thank them, and I want to thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at Falling and Loving.